I'd like to bring the formal part of this presentation to conclusion with Mr. Kevin McCarthy. He is the Education Director for the Global Peace Festival Foundation USA. He was the former pastor of the Washington, D.C. Family Church and former director of the Interdenominational Conference of Clergy. He also has served as a regional director of the American Leadership Conference. Mr. McCarthy is currently serving on the curriculum committee for the Coalition for American Renewal. And it's just great to have him here today to just share some more with you as we become actively engaged. Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Kevin McCarthy. As I set this up, I'm going to let him sing a song.
That'll keep you awake. Let's see here. One moment, please.
It's amazing what you're doing.
We're having great fun, too.
Look at you.
That you're doing impressive work. Because we need to know those stories.
We want to know your stories.
We need those stories.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's really a blessing for me to be in Atlanta. I haven't been to Atlanta since I was 21 years old in 1993. And yeah, all right. No, I was a little older then, but no, in 1973, when I was 21, I came to Atlanta. I was a new Christian, and it was a Sunday morning, and I went to Ebenezer Baptist Church.
All right.
And I could talk for the whole 20 minutes about my experience there, but I'll just suffice it to say that Daddy King is called Daddy King because he's a daddy to that whole church, and he certainly was a daddy to me that day, and I'll never forget it. You know, I've had the opportunity over the years to really spend some time with some of the icons of the civil rights era, Hosea Williams, James Bevel, Dr. Abernathy. And, you know, one thing I've come to learn is that unless you have a teacher, you'll never really understand. And so I thank God that I've had so many good teachers, and so I really so grateful for that. So, you know, this is a special place for me. But I want to continue. I want to continue the presentation and build on Jim's presentation. He started out by talking about it's the common values. It's the values that we hold together that really bind our nation together and make us one people. And so I want to build on that because we sort of lost touch with these common values. So I want to take a look at maybe how that happened, and then finally how we can bring them back together, how we can really reform around those common values. One of the challenges of our time is that we're such a bigger, more diverse nation in the 21st century compared to the 18th century. In the 18th century, America was primarily a nation of a few Christian denominations, and basically everyone looked to the same Bible from which they derived their values perspective. So to have a consensus on values in the 18th century was maybe a little bit easier than today in the 21st century. Look how America has changed since that time. Certainly our population has increased over 17,000%. The number of territories and states have quadrupled. Our land area has expanded by 700%. And of course, America today generally is a much more diverse nation in terms of religion. At the time of the founding, a few Christian denominations. Today, over 300 religions and denominations in America. And certainly we know we're much more diverse in terms of ethnicity and races and so forth in America today. So these present a challenge for us. And so if we lose God in the equation, given the extreme diversity of America, we'll certainly pull apart. And I think we could see evidence of that. We don't want that to happen. Another reality that we have to consider is that there have been many movements over the years, and certainly in the 20th century and continuing to the 21st century, movements that proposed changes in our value system, not just with different values, but with values that are antithetical to the God-focused, the God-affirming values of our founding. Values that sought to negate and deny and then change the basis of our culture. And of course, in the 60s, it was the counterculture and the sexual revolution. How do you like this graphic here? Isn't that pretty good? The good ship USA about to go down. And, we don't have time to go into a deep analysis, but let's just look at one value that has been transformed by the counterculture. The value of liberty. The value of liberty. Or what constitutes freedom today in America compared to the God-affirming values that we know. Think about it. Jefferson said that freedom was a gift from God. And the reason he thought that was because he read his Bible, and it said, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And Paul told us, don't use your freedom for an occasion of the flesh. Instead, serve the brethren. So think about it. The Bible reveals to us that the purpose of liberty is to love God and to love mankind. That's why God gave us liberty, for that purpose. That's the purpose of freedom. So the preamble of the Constitution said, sometimes the Constitution is referred to as a secular-only document. But the preamble asserts that the purpose of government is to secure the blessing of liberty. Well, if liberty is a blessing, there has to be a blessor, right? And who is that? That's God. Liberty is a gift from God to a virtuous people. And that's another theme that we saw in the first presentation that Jim gave, is that, as I say, freedom isn't free, but freedom is for a virtuous people, a people of faith, and that the virtues of faith enacted, or as Dr. Bird said, making the invisible God visible by our behavior, by our choice of behavior. That was the theory of self-government, the theory of freedom in our founding. So look at our culture today. And this individual, Alexis de Tocqueville, he observed American culture in the early 19th century. And he said this: Americans combine the notion of religion and liberty so intimately in their minds that it is impossible to make them conceive of one without the other. Wow, that's a good culture. And as it was mentioned this morning, we're not saying let's just go back and everything was wonderful and hunky-dory in the early years of America. No, it was this dynamic, however, that really was at the root of the abolition movement and later the civil rights movement. This integration and synergy between our faith and our action, our faith and our virtues and our freedom. And this really intrigued Tocqueville when he observed this. So if we compare freedom today, the definition of freedom counterculture, which has morphed into our media-driven popular culture today. How is freedom defined? How is freedom defined? I can do what I want. I can do as I please. Especially you religious people can't tell me, that I have to accommodate some sort of immutable truth or law to my own behavior. You're at a line. It's your morality. You live by your morality, but don't go trying to impose it on me. That's kind of the idea of our popular culture. That's the belief system, and you can get a good little thumbnail sketch of that culture if you go to your TV and hold your nose and try to watch Jersey Shore for 10 minutes, and watch the exploits of Snooki and JWoww. That's a bad wow, as a matter of fact. Yours was a good. I mean, to tell you, in the 60s, there was the slogan, "If it feels good, do it." That's a cultural transformation of freedom that separates God from the civil society. So we saw a tremendous cultural change taking place. Also in the area of politics, in the turn of the century, there was, as America was maturing and so forth, we see in the area of political philosophy, new political philosophies, and a new progressive political science was being heralded. And it also was introducing the idea that the spiritual guarantees to freedom, the spiritual guarantees to the people from God, these immutable laws and principles are problematic. And we need to rethink our political philosophies. One of the earliest proponents of that thinking was Woodrow Wilson, who was elected president in, I think it was 1912. And he said this. He said, if you want to understand the real Declaration of Independence, do not repeat the preface. Do you know what he meant by that? The preface of the Declaration of Independence is where the affirmation of God is established. The preface is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that all are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. Let's just forget that. That was Wilson's proposal. Now, why on earth would he say such a thing? He basically opposed the founders' idea that the written law must track with the immutable laws of nature and of nature's God. He saw that as antiquated and problematic. These were only cumbersome and barriers to running government effectively and efficiently. So he was pretty wrong about that. But again, I think Jim said, ideas have consequences. We're the community of faith, and we feel somewhat alienated from the culture that surrounds our churches. And there is a reason we feel that way. There's a reason when we turn on our TV, as Barbara was mentioning. What we see is so offensive. Wait a minute, where did this come from? But in fact, like the proverbial frog in the saucepan, incrementally over time, we've been straying away from the idea that God is relevant to civil society. If there was a simple definition of the founder's idea, it would be that God is relevant to civil society. And so there has been a historical effort to separate God from civil society. This fellow here, John Dewey, as a matter of fact, John Dewey was a classmate of Woodrow Wilson at Johns Hopkins University. And they studied many of the similar new progressive ideas. Dewey was a leader in the pragmatic progressive education reform in America. And prior to the era of Dewey was the theory of education in America was education entails the education of the mind, the body, and of the soul. It was a very integrated concept of education. As a matter of fact, most of your top universities like Harvard, Yale, Princeton started out as seminaries. Did you know that? That's most of your universities, your institutions of higher education, were very much under the philosophy of an integrated education approach. Dewey was radically different in that regard and sought to radically change the philosophy of education in America. So he wanted to basically free education from the constraints of immutable laws and transcendent principles, the laws of nature and of nature's God. Like Wilson, he concluded that education could be more effective in molding students to deal with a contemporary godless society, secular reality, if they were not fettered by the irrelevant theories of the past. That was his real motives. Another interesting side note to Dewey is that Dewey was one of the not only one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto, but he was the predominant author of the Humanist Manifesto, the first one. And you can see his animosity, antagonism to the preface of the Declaration in the fifth tenet of the Humanist Manifesto. It says, "Humanism asserts that the nature of the universe depicted by modern science makes unacceptable any supernatural or cosmic guarantees of human values." What is that negating? It's negating the preface of the Declaration, which is really what links God to our existence, to our society, to the civil society. So this has also borne a very great impact on the role of the church in civil society. This is, again, the frog in the saucepan. And we've been gradually alienated from the society around us. And this has been happening through new theories of what the First Amendment means. And so we see the term separation of church and state. Well, this theory of separating immutable principles and transcendent principles, immutable laws, the laws of nature and of nature's God, from the Constitution is what has given birth to what is referred to as the living and breathing Constitution. And so many new ideas about what is the role of the church and civil society have stemmed from this new definition of the Constitution as a living and breathing organism. So as we saw, the founders' idea was that the church and civil society would have a high dynamic, a real synergy, where the transcendent principles of faith would very naturally be the virtues that would guide behavior of the civil society. But with the high and impregnable wall that is the conclusion of the living and breathing Constitution, the high and impregnable wall, has utterly, really has had a tremendous effect on this dynamic between the role of faith, virtue, and liberty in America. As a matter of fact, this wall here really should have 4 sides to it and go all the way around the church, because effectively that's the intention, to cordon off you religious people. You can go have your sermon, go and have your church service, but stay out of the public square. And that's not just, like it seems like that's going on, but no, they wouldn't do that. But in fact, there are ideas behind that circumstance. So the result of that is that what kind of values then dominate the civil society? It's not God-centered principles, the laws of nature and of nature's God, but it's instead the secular, selfish individualism. Life without God. And how successful can life be without God? Not very. And so what we see then is a polarization, a pulling apart of American society. And not even being able to agree anymore on what is right and wrong. So to have a consensus of values in such a circumstance is a great challenge. That's why recently the Culture and Media Institute enacted or engaged in a national cultural values survey. And they concluded Americans today no longer enjoy cultural consensus on God, religion, and not even on what constitutes right and wrong. And so we live in an America today that can no longer agree on what is right and wrong. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his book, Strength to Love, which was published in 1963, said something very, very important for us today, speaking to this age. He said, the church must be reminded that it is not the master or servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state, the conscience of the civil society. This second paragraph is very interesting. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority. What's the most important word in that paragraph, do you think? What word? There's one word up here that should jump out at you. Huh?
Church.
Recapture. This was 1963. That means in 1963, we had lost our prophetic zeal. Did we regain it back since then? I don't think so. So we have lost a position in civil society. One of the missions of CAR is that we should regain that position. Amen to that, right?
Amen.
You know, my default setting isn't like a political, I'm not a political pundit or anything like that. But if I look at the political situation, I think the greatest problem for the president, whoever he is that the prophets are not there.
Well,
The prophets. Who are the prophets? That's us. The prophets are not there. Even King David had Nathan. But the prophets are not in their place. And King was telling us. Now, here's another thing. Here's another thing. He said we have to recapture our prophetic zeal. And how do we do that? Do we first get the zeal and then take the position of the prophet? Or do we, in faith, take the position of the prophet and then the zeal comes down from heaven? Which one is it? First one or the second one? Second one. We have to go in faith. We can look at Moses. God told Moses, go down to Egypt, but the whole way he's going, I can't do this. I can't speak. I got a stutter. I got a meeting. I can't do this. I got too much to do. The whole way. But when you take the position, then God gives us the word. How did we lose that position, brothers and sisters? I think because we lost our unity. We lost sense of how we should work together. What is the groundwork of our partnership? And we began to divide. Oh, well, I don't believe like you, and I can't hold hands with these people. And, so we just basically did what we could, but we're losing the culture. And so here is what Carr proposes in terms of our common mission. We all have our divine focuses. And, a traditional interfaith activity sometimes was suggesting if y'all would just believe a little less fervently, and we all believe the same thing, and let's get along and tolerate each other. Well, we're not saying that. Everyone has their divine focus, and any church leader, pastor, spiritual leader worth their salt is going to feel my way is the only true way to God, and that's it. That's how you're supposed to believe. So Carr isn't interested in trying to change anyone's theology or trying to say, hey, tone it down or anything like that. That's not where our common mission resides. Our common mission resides rather in the civil focus, our civil focus. Can we agree that an ethical and moral nation pleases God? Can we? Can we agree on that? And then can we work together to help bring that about? That's our common area of focus. That's where we can partnership. That's where we can come together to renew the conscience of America. If we can't build a consensus on values, we cannot renew the conscience of anyone. Because when there's all different kinds of versions of truth and value, anybody can justify anything. So our civil focus, we define civil virtues through dialogue and discussion. We raise the social conscience, a social conscience that is rooted in faith, making the invisible God visible. I love that. And take action through acts of love and service to others. In that way, we can recapture our prophetic zeal and the position. And we can be a voice to all our political leaders, that they establish policies that are pleasing to God. Pleasing to God, that's the key. So our shared civil mission is to form partnerships with other faith traditions, and it is natural response to the conviction that a civil society and world is pleasing to God. And despite our doctrinal differences, there are transcendent principles that can be embraced by all faiths, the self-evident truths. Communities of faith in partnership with a common vision can make an essential contribution toward a consensus on civil values. And finally, this civil focus partnership is vital if we are to rebuild America's moral and ethical foundation. Shall we join together to do that? Amen. Thank you very much.